Good evening and a very warm welcome from Military Literature Festival, Lucknow. We are on to our season 2. A very warm welcome to our panelists, that is Sudeep Chakravarti, who is speaking from Dhaka, and Lieutenant General Himalay Singh, who is speaking to us from Manipur. As you know, our theme this year is 75 years of armed independence and armed forces. Till now, we already covered 1947, something about J&K, 1962, 1965. 1971, we had covered last year. So today, we look forward to going to the eastern side of India, where our conversation will be based on a book written by Sudeep Chakravarti that is called The Eastern Gate. Earlier, he had written a book on a similar topic called NH-39, The Fractured Country. As I see the cover of his book, I see a gun, and around it is wrapped barbed wire. It means, to me, it looks like that gun is getting silent, and from the barrel, I can see a lot of flowers coming out. And behind is the beautiful sun, the vibrant and beautiful Northeast. Lovely people. So we will be talking about Manipur today. The session will be moderated by General Dr. Khonsam Himalay Singh. He is a highly decorated soldier, Param Vishish Seva Medal, Uttam Yuddha Seva Medal, Ati Vishish Seva Medal, and Yuddha Seva Medal, which he was bestowed with this gallantry award during the Kargil War. After his retirement, he has been the chairman of the Manipur Service Commission, and during his service, he was ex officio advisor to the government of J&K. He has had many tenures in the Northeast as well as in J&K, all in the field. I think it's an envious experience. General Himalay Singh has also written a book called Making of a General, which is very readable. He is often invited to various places to give talks, and he is also an advisor to the government of Manipur on the Naga peace talks. So with that, I will hand you over to General Himalay Singh to steer today's conversation. Over to you, General.
Thank you, General H.K. Singh, sir, for your kind words. And I also Military Literature Festival, Lucknow, for inviting me for this function, for this day. And I also welcome Deep Chakravarti, who has authored this book, The Eastern Gate, War and Peace, Nagaland and Manipur. A few words about this book. I mean, it's really, it was almost like a fictional book to me. I really enjoyed reading this. Being a citizen of the country in this part of the country, I really enjoyed reading his book. Almost a combined expose on political issues, the history, the geography, the internal security, the human rights, reports, and commentary on various issues, particularly the related to insurgency and other law and order, internal security issues in the Northeast, particularly Manipur and Nagaland. So what a pleasure it was to go through. I'm also delighted by the fact that we have very, very respected all of you, those who are in the, taking part in this this literature festival today. I'm particularly, I would like to mention General Naidu. I heard his name, Milan Naidu, a very respected senior, and of course, General KJ Singh. I just heard their names. So I'm delighted to be amongst you. My aim would be to interact with Sudeep Chakravarti on this book, The Eastern Gate, and how beautifully he is written. And I will be asking, or I'll be interacting with him, asking a few questions so that I get into his mind as to what he thought while writing a few lines here and there, which are really, really very, very forceful. At least it looked very forceful to me. So, Sudeep, are you ready? Can you hear me, Sudeep?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ready for you.
Sudeep, the title of the book, The Eastern Gate, is very, very catchy. In Manipur, the folklore is that when the Eastern Gate in Manipuri is called Nongpok Thong, when the Eastern Gate is open, that
General,
is the prosperity or changes, positive
yes.
change will come to Manipur. So I suppose that we have based your title of the book on this. And War and Peace is very, very interesting. So my first question to you is that, you have used a very, very forceful phrase called war of spin. I quote, war of spin, unquote. You also mentioned, along with this, in the same paragraph, you said Nagalim for Christ, and what kind of a construct is going on in Nagaland and in Manipur. And also, in the same story, or in the same page, you have written, India's Far East will remain in churn. I mean, very, very forceful words, and which must be, understood by people. Can you say a few words on this? The India's Far East will remain in churn. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, General. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be speaking to you. You are from Manipur. You're of the Indian Army. You're of India, and you, of course, know the region far better than I ever hoped to. Far better than I ever hoped to. So thank you very much for your doing me the honor of this conversation, and thank you to Military Literature Festival, Lucknow, of course, for giving me the opportunity. Now, General, when I, as you know, because you read the book, when I called it the Eastern Gate, I actually referred to two things over here. One is, of course, the fascination, if you will, with Indian foreign policy and Indian geostrategic policy since 1994, which began with Mr. Narasimha Rao calling it India's Look East policy, and then when Mr. Modi became Prime Minister, his government rephrased it to Act East policy. So there has been a sort of a focus on looking, in my mind, for cynical reasons, but we can talk about that a little later, perhaps. I don't think they're doing it for reasons of necessarily democratic security or for making the people happy, but perhaps essentially to secure India in their vision document, if you will. And the other aspect, which is, I think, far more genuine, is a phrase that I took from a lady who I greatly respect, who's from Manipur, a lady who I know as Ima Mangal Devi, Mother Mangal Devi. And I heard her say this thing to me, to a large audience in Imphal several years ago, where we were talking about how Manipur could be treated with respect. Indeed, what we call northeastern India could be treated with greater respect. Because if it were not so, she invoked a phrase in Meiteilon, and General, please forgive me if I don't pronounce it correctly. I have to take Mitterrand lessons from you after this. She, she invoked this phrase from Mete Law to essentially send India a message, which I found very, very powerful, very, very honest and upfront. She said, she spoke to opening the Eastern Gate, and in Meiteilon, it's Nonpok Thong Hangba. And she referred to the idea that if India did not take care with its eastern extremities, with the eastern boundaries, then the eastern boundaries would be perhaps compelled to closing their western gate, which is essentially India, in that telling. And she described it as Nongchuk Thong Tingbak. And to me, it summed up the psychology of this eastern region of the Republic of India. I refuse to call it Northeast India, even though that's what it's called, because for me, that's just a bureaucratic term. No other part of India is called Northern India, Western India, or Southern India, or Central India. I don't see why it should be called Northeast India, but that's for another time and place. I have a lot of these pet peeves, by the way. And that's something that I take very close to my heart. Now, I do not think that even with the very welcome increase in interaction that there have been between the people of what in the Northeast is called mainland India, which is basically every area west of Assam, every part of India west of Assam. And there's greater interaction with the region that is east of Assam. And this interaction has gone beyond the traditional kind of interaction of, say, Indian administrative service officers or Indian police service officers or Indian army officers and personnel being posted to the Northeast. It's come to civilians. It's come to non-bureaucratic personnel. It's gone to tourists. It's gone to a lot of interaction. People from this eastern region are coming to places west of Assam to study, to work, to learn, to live, to live their lives. So that great interaction is happening. But yet, I think that the psychological bridge has not been achieved. I think there is a great degree of misunderstanding that still continues in New Delhi, primarily in policy circles. I do not think that there is enough understanding of this region. More importantly, I do not think there is enough understanding of the aspiration of the people in this region. So my thesis, General, is that, after all, the army secures the borders of India. Army secures the heart and armed forces secure the heart and soul of India. It acts as firefighters along with the various police forces of India. But surely it is being done on the behalf of the 50 million or so citizens of what we call Northeastern India, who occupy a landmass which is nearly 1/7 of the Republic of India. These are very, very significant sums. So I think it all adds up to a great amount of significance, General. But because of this lack of what I see as, even today in 2022, I see as not enough clarity and understanding of how to deal with this enormously complex region with its several hundred tribes, several ethnicities, several hundred languages and dialects, and so on and so forth, and various peculiar needs and wants and aspirations. I don't think there is a great appreciation of that. I do not think that there is a great appreciation of looking beyond the military interests and the geostrategic and the geo-economic interests of India. And I think until that happens, this region will remain in churn. That is my personal belief from traveling intensively within the region for several years. I, of course, do not claim to be a Bhumiputra, a son of the soil, but I do consider myself a sort of a self-imposed honorary citizen of what we call Northeastern India. And here, and it is in the geopolitical and geoeconomic sweet spot, General. I mean, you know that so well because, people in the armed forces have to go through these blue books and doctrines and all your battle plans and game theories and all the scenarios that you play out. You're playing it out with a extremely volatile country to your immediate south and west, which is Bangladesh. You have China to the north. You have Nepal not too far away. There's Bhutan, and you have a very, very volatile region of Myanmar to the east and to the south of the region. So that is even if you claim, even if one were to claim in some fictional format that India is getting more stable with its policies, the fact is that the neighbors of India around this region are not always as stable as we would like to have them. So the churn is not just contributed by Indian policy, or maybe understanding or lack of understanding, or even by the internal dynamics of the various states and the peoples that make up the so-called Northeast India, but also this neighborhood that surrounds it. So that is why, sir, I repeatedly say that it will remain in a state of churn unless we pay attention in the policy making circles to this reality, and this informs all our policies related to the Northeast, from peacemaking to peace treaties to peace accords to peace negotiations with various factions of ethnic groups, whether in Nagaland or Manipur, where conflict technically continues as we speak. There are various other parts of the Northeast. Arunachal Pradesh is a little restive. Tripura is sometimes restive. Meghalaya is often on restive. You know the reality, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us this evening. So I'll stop here, General, to just sort of give this my personal sort of overview, if you will, a bird's eye view of why I think I made that statement, sir, when I said that I think the Northeast will remain in a churn.
Sudeep, I can make out that you are emotionally attached to the entire Northeast India and whatever is happening here. That's I appreciate that. And my impression is that the integration story of the Northeast India with rest of the country, it's an irreversible process, and it's a given. However, what people do question, and certain ethnic conflicts here and there, is about assimilation.
Right.
Because of various, you mentioned about more than 200 groups. So the policy planners must distinguish between what is integration and what is assimilation, and they that need that's what you mentioned. My next question, or my next thing I would like to know, or the viewers would like to know, is that Armed Forces Special Power came into being. It was applied in Nagaland in 1958, and Assam and Nagaland, basically Naga Hills. That time there was no Nagaland in 1958. It was Naga Hills of the state of Assam. There has been certain, alleged violence, and from both sides, obviously, in a war of this kind, there will be, certain issues related to violence.
Mm-hmm.
On page 139 of your book, I was reading that during the visit of Prime Minister Modi on 3rd of August 2019, you made a mention that Prime Minister, I quote, could have apologized for the past, unquote. My view is slightly different in the sense that, it was a internal security, leading to almost secessionist, very, very strong, the first of its kind insurgency in Nagaland, Manipur. And it was conflict which resulted in all that, and is still going on. So, firstly, what did you, it's again a very powerful message you are giving. I mean, Prime Minister could have apologized, which I, as a military man, yes, in some indirectly, but the soldiers and Indian Army, if we had to apologize, in many countries, I mean, it has happened. You have written in your book also, the head of state apologized for certain this thing. So what was at the back of your mind when you wrote this book on page number 139 about Prime Minister could have apologized for the past? I mean, can you just elucidate as to what were you thinking? What made you say this? Yeah.
Well, one of the things is, General, thank you very much for that. And I realize that it may seem like a somewhat provocative statement, but I said it in all earnestness and with peace and prosperity in mind. And after all, I am a card-carrying citizen of the Republic of India. I do carry a blue passport, and very proudly so. So let me begin with that preface, if I may. General, I just felt that, someone who is a government and a leader who projects as a muscular personality and or a strong personality must at some point of time show humility in strength. I think that is a true sign of a leader. That was one logic that I came with. The other thing is that I think it's a sense of maturity, sir, because when this problem began, and you know this history far better than I would, when this problem began, and here, if you would permit me, sir, to go back a little bit in history, because I think it's important to set the context clearly. When the problems began, and these problems began for the same reasons, sir, as you know very well, that the problems of Maoism began, the problems of other issues in the heart of India began, was essentially a denial of dignity, respect, and aspiration to the people who were looking for it. Now, at a time when when India was at the cusp of its independence, I point to you, sir, to a certain statement where Mr. Nehru, when he was negotiating, our first prime minister, when he was negotiating actually before India gained independence with the Naga leadership at that time. That time, the discussions were not with the royal, the kingdom of Manipur. That came later, as you know, in the arc of negotiations and integration. When the discussions were happening, the discussions were very clearly on the both sides were being listened to. Mr. Nehru's on the record by writing to Naga leaders like Mr. Sakri, who unfortunately was killed by the Naga rebel by his own people. That's another story, as a result of internal conflict. When he became a great enemy to Mr. Fizo, Mr. Sakri and Mr. Nehru corresponded, and at a time when Mr. Nehru acknowledged the fact that the Naga people have their own aspirations, and for the longest time, for several years after India's independence, when Mr. Nehru was actually in visiting Assam and the Northeast for campaigning for India's first parliamentary elections over 51 and 1952, Mr. Fizo, who was a Naga National Council leader at that time, and Mr. Nehru met several times, and the conversations were even then of wasn't about independence, sir. It was about autonomy. It was about self-governance. It was about having given the Naga people more rights. And then the situation became a little more hardline because among the Naga people and so on and so forth. So it began from a moderate position on both sides, and then solidified into a sort of a more hardline position. And I think psychologically, the governance at the time was that it's a new country coming together. We've just we've had India birth itself with a great amount of blood, sweat, and tears. And that time, I think psychologically, the government of India and maybe Mr. Nehru and his colleagues were unwilling after a point to listen to even to any demand or any word of negotiation that even breathed a degree of autonomy, greater autonomy, bordering on independence. So when hardline positions developed, then violence began to grow. As we know, the Naga Home Guards attacked Tuensang in 1953. Then there were counter battles, and then the Assam Rifles were attacked. They counter-attacked the Home Guards. Then after a couple of years, the Indian Army was sent. And then, of course, it just went ballistic, literally, on both sides. And then various things happened. But, sir, and then AFSPA, as you said, came into play in 1958. But there were already acts in place over 1954, 55, 56, and 57, which were precursors to AFSPA in place. It just sort of had a new avatar in 1958. Short point, sir, is that when everything escalated so quickly and bad blood came to play, then AFSPA was imposed. And unfortunately, there were incidents, and as you rightly said, that there were sort of incidents of gross violence, which impacted competence and non-competence on both sides. So I think these things envelope. But my point has been, sir, that when I'm looking for a statesman to apologize, I'm really looking at a statesman to acknowledge what I sincerely believe these problems all began with and continue to be. It is not a security issue to my mind. It is not even a law and order issue. It is a simple issue of lack of governance. It's a governance issue to my mind. You gentlemen and ladies in the armed forces, you gentlemen and ladies in the police services are firefighters when governance goes wrong. This has been proven over and over again. Now, if leaders of India, if the leaders of the region have the courage to come out and say, without taking names, it can be done elegantly. It doesn't need too many words. It maybe needs 3 or 4 sentences to just come out and make a simple statement saying, let's move on. Let's leave the past behind. Things have happened. In fact, Mr. Modi, General Himalaya actually said something quite similar without saying sorry. When he signed on 3rd August 2015, when the framework agreement for peace was signed in the Prime Minister's house in New Delhi, he actually used the phrase, let's leave history behind, let's move on. He could have, just a few more words of politeness would have made all the difference. And I can assure you that the Naga people would have accepted it, because it is really an emotional issue. It's a question of respect and dignity, which a lot of people don't realize, sir. And I think you see that very well. And it's not just in Nagaland; it's also true of Manipur, where insurgencies exist. And so my point, sir, is that these are gestures which powerful people can make in a powerful country. Weak leaders and weak countries do not make these gestures. Strong leaders and strong, mature democracies in particular, and India is now 75 years old. I think we are well past the expiry date of being seen as insecure. I think we are quite insecure as a republic. We are quite secure, my apologies, as a republic. We are quite secure as a nation. We want to be on the UN Security Council. We want to be seen as world players, global players, regional players, so on and so forth. Surely we can reach out to our own citizens, people we consider to be our citizens, and treat them as our brothers and sisters by just a few words. What does it cost, sir? That is where I'm coming from. So I'm not coming at it from a point of anything else. I'm coming at it from a point of a statecraft, an emotional statecraft, even a politician statecraft, which would knit the people together by playing to their emotional needs. Sir. There is a great emotional need in my mind with the people in the Northeast, more than anything else.
Okay, okay, Sudeep. What we'll do, I've got such a long list of questions which may be of interest to the viewers. Right. So I will request you a little shorten the answer so that we have more. I like your
my apologies.
The word that you mentioned about the issue is about governance. This is what I have been shouting all along in Delhi and elsewhere. Good. You mentioned about the framework agreement of August 2015. And the entire issue, the issue today is about the interpretation of the words shared sovereignty, uniqueness, inclusive, and entities and all that. Officially the framework agreement has not been made public, but you from here and there, in fact, you have nicely put it in your book also. So from framework agreement, about 7 years now, and there are talks of, there are many issues like, somebody has written about conflict fatigue. Right. It's more than 25 years that as, the peace talks have been going on. So who climbs down is the issue on flag and the constitution. Who climbs down? Right. It's a prolonged period of ceasefire. So yeah, beautifully covered, the possibilities and the various geostrategic issues. You have written that. But my specific question to you is that the finalization or the Naga Accord as such has got stuck. In fact, I'm one of the mechanisms, in this issue. But I'd like to know from you, the viewers may like to know from you, is that what now? Because you have also written the Naga problem, the solution lies in Manipur, or words to that effect you have written in your book. So what do we do now? From now, let's say, everyone wants some kind of accord. Manipur wants, government of Manipur wants, India government wants, NSCNI wants, Nagaland government wants, people want it. So in your perspective, what is the way ahead in a very, you don't have to go through the entire framework agreement, but you must be having some perspective. You have interacted with multiple stakeholders, I can see from your
Yes.
book. So
Yes.
what, in your opinion, would you recommend
Sir-
point A, B, C today?
Sir, straight away, the first point is that there can be no solution without all the parties walking at least part of the way. I think that has also happened. Some pathways have been made very, very clear, abundantly clear. I believe that from whatever information that I have, you might have a lot more, of course, is that it's stuck to my mind on the egos of the rebel leadership. Here I'm specifically talking about the Naga rebel leadership, not the Indian leadership as such, or the negotiating parties on behalf of India. It is not stuck because of the Naga people. I do not even believe that it's stuck on account of the people of Naga ethnicity who are geographically in the state of Manipur. I do not think it is even stuck because of the people of Manipur at large. There is a great need on all sides to come to a rapprochement because of the fatigue of conflict. People have to move on. Nobody wants to be left behind. Nobody wants to be left behind. And I think, sir, that there have been many gestures that have been made which are excellent. For instance, there have been plans of resettlement and rehabilitation of, for instance, the Naga rebel cadres. There have been discussions about resettling and rehabilitating even the Naga leadership, Naga rebel leadership. There have been talks about how the Nagaland legislature will be made a bicameral legislature to politically accommodate Naga rebel leadership into the political mainstream. For instance, there have been talks about delimitation exercises to increase legislator seats in the legislature. There have been talks, proposals made to the government of Manipur and the people of Manipur that let's be a little more generous, increase the number of, through delimitation, increase the number of seats in the Manipur legislature to accord our brothers and sisters in the hills more political opportunity in Manipur's legislature so that they feel that they belong to Manipur, so that there is no need politically or emotionally to be with a sort of a greater Naga homeland, if you will. There is emotionally a homeland of the Naga people anyway. No lines on the map will ever be able to delete them. But in practical terms, there have been plentiful offers made. There have been plentiful offers made for development funds, so on and so forth. So I think, I don't think that the last mile has happened because of primarily 2 or 3 major reasons. And I'll be very brief, General, with these things, as following your very practical instructions. One, I think, is that even with the proposals that have come forward and the outreach that has happened in Nagaland and in Manipur, because the problem is actually conjoined, as we know very well. I think the leadership in New Delhi has always held back in pushing too hard with its suggested solutions in Manipur out of the sheer political fear of losing Manipur electorally. That has been a key bottleneck to my mind. And number 2, I think that the Naga rebel leadership, many of which are actually, they call their homelands are actually ironically situated in Manipur. They don't really have an ethnic base in what is the state of Nagaland, so to speak. I think from the Naga rebel perspective, the holdup is not because of the Naga people at all. It is because of a very few elements in the top echelons of the Naga leadership who are thinking about a post-conflict life and trying to figure out what next. What do we do with the power that we've lost? What do we do that we no longer speak with the barrel of the gun? What happens to our immunity and impunity post-conflict? What happens to our nest eggs? These are also discussions, and I would speak freely about these things. And you can imagine that I'm not always very welcome in these areas where such leaders inhabit, for obvious reasons. I speak to directly to their needs, perhaps. But I think these are the kind of things that have happened. And also the third point, which is holding things up, is I think about the constitution and the flag, for instance, the Naga constitution and the flag. The Naga constitution, which actually harks back to the first Yezabo of the constitution in the 1950s and 60s, and then an updated one in 2016, is actually generally, if you read the wordings of that Naga constitution, is very, very retrograde, to my mind, and very backward, which is not good for the Naga people. The government of India, the Republic of India, through the Constitution of India, through Articles 371A, for instance, give the Naga people, in at least the state of Nagaland, way more than the Constitution. If we look at the Constitution that the NSC and IM, for instance, proposes, the 371A of the Constitution of India is far more progressive than anything being placed on offer by the Naga rebel Yezabo, for instance. So I don't think that's a valid reason. In terms of the flag general, I think that cause was lost the day that Article 370 was abrogated, Article 35A was abrogated in Jammu and Kashmir, and with it, the special provisions of the flag and the constitution for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The day that went in August in 2019, that possibility, that political possibility of something similar happening for the Naga people, to my mind, went as well. So there are several factors which are, I think, playing to the reality as to why the peace process has been stuck since October 2019. Everything is done, sir. Everything is done. Just people have to walk a little further. Among the Naga people, among the people in Manipur, among the government of India. I think there is concordance, but just that extra step of generosity and reality has to kick in, sir. And then I think it's a done deal.
Thank you very much. We look forward to more peaceful environment in this part of the country. And I agree with you. 371A actually empowers the Legislative Assembly of Nagaland to an extent that is somewhat Article 370 at the level of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, which was removed. Whereas Article 371C removes the power of Legislative Assembly of Manipur. That's the comparison. So you brought it out so beautifully. Next discussion that I'd like to take you to other parts of Northeast India, Assam in particular. Assam Accord, NRC, CAA, you have described it very well in your book, but you have also written that these are, I quote from your book, looming humanitarian crisis with overtones of security crisis, unquote. This is one because you feel that NRC CAA is a recipe, I won't say of disaster, but somewhat security crisis in your word. Similarly, in the same, continuation, you have also written that an unstable and unguarded Eastern Gate with China in the wings and with Islamic extremism somewhat raising its head and various other things you said. Again, I said, quote, Kolkata could implode, unquote. Right. This is what. So therefore, there is a complete concoction of security issues that you have met out in those pages of your book. Sometimes I felt that, you are a little more pessimistic, but let me tell you, the military people are, I won't say pessimistic, but very, very cautious about, being rosy things coming. We have a dictum that we should be prepared for the worst.
Well, so I was taking the inspiration from the army's wargaming techniques. So Sorry for interrupting, sir. Please continue.
Yeah. So my question to you is, can you just give out, in a few minutes, how just at least explain a little, because you have written it in great detail in the entire north, particularly Assam, and even you have written Kolkata could implode.
Sir.
Yeah, over.
So this is based on, again, a couple of key incidents and a couple of key assumptions, if you will. And this is, of course, something that, as you know, since you've read the book, that it actually came out of a sort of a gaming situation, a scenario or planning situation that I did for a think tank several years ago, which led me to these conclusions, suggestions and conclusions. One is very clear, sir, is that when there is political churn within a country, in this particular case, India, then it again creates governance issues. And then again, the police and the armed forces are called in as firefighters. It's happened again and again and again in India's history, in a history of 75 years. So when there is a politically volatile situation, for instance, in Assam, where a game is being played with politics in mind, not necessarily a sort of a development in mind, if you will, or peace and prosperity in mind, then I think that cynical outlook will doesn't, I mean, plays into the hands of people who will take that volatile situation and run with it. So I think CAA and NRC has created a situation in Assam where, to my mind, without any exaggeration whatsoever, General, I believe that it's now become a laboratory, if you will, or a test case of what can go wrong from a place of relative stability. Assam is not a stable place at this point of time. Politically, it is pretty volatile. You have a state of Assam as large as it is, touching Bhutan. It touches northern Bengal, which is not stable at the best of times. It has a fairly large border with Bangladesh in a very, very volatile part of Bangladesh. You have that, and it comes down to lower Assam, where there are other issues, so on and so forth, the demographic issues, the religious issues, and there, an aspect like CAA and NRC can play havoc, sir, which it has. I mean, there have been gross humanitarian disorders in Assam, which the army has nothing to do with. The police have nothing to do with, but the political system has everything to do with. So if instability is being created by the political system, my concern and fear is that it could snowball into a security situation, in which case the police and the army will be again brought in as firefighters. Number one. Number two, there's one situation that we actually do not see in that situation very well. Or, I mean, of course, people like you see it very well, but not citizens of India, as it were. We are dealing with a situation in a country called Bangladesh. I'm speaking from the capital of Bangladesh now. I'm in Dhaka. Every day, sir, I see the effect of climate change. It is a very real thing in this country, in this very, very deltaic region. Dhaka city has, every time there is a holiday in Dhaka city, 10 million to 15 million people empty out to go back home, not in Dhaka, to the southern districts. That is the volume of people we're talking about. When, because of sort of climate catastrophes, floods, high tides, storms, inundation, which happens every year, more and more people are moving to places to the north, away from Bangladesh. Now, and I'm bringing Bangladesh here in deliberately, and I mentioned this theory in my book as well, this approach. So unless, for instance, Bangladesh, I'm just giving an example, and Northeast India in turn, are able to economically and socio-economically secure themselves, you are looking at a demographic shift where, when people go up from the Bay of Bengal further north, you're looking at a population explosion, which, where does it go? It goes everywhere to the north, east, and the west. There is no other place for any people in this deltaic region to go except up and to the east and the west. So if I max out a worst case scenario, then there is no border fencing on Earth, General, that can hold back a tide of humanity, which is tens of millions strong. And the inundation will happen as much with climatic reasons as with people. There is no power on Earth that can stem a tide like that. It cannot. If that were to come to pass, then BSF's border posts will be meaningless. Then the then the regions to the north of Bangladesh, which is Assam, Meghalaya, to the west of Bangladesh, which is Bengal, to the east of Bangladesh, which is Tripura, lower Assam, further east, Nagaland, Manipur, lower down, Tripura, Mizoram. There will be a demographic inundation. There's no power on earth that can stop it. So I come at it from that logic. Of course, it's sort of looking a little bit into the future. But if we do not plan for the future now, if we do not secure ourselves now, if we do not secure our neighbors now, then I think we are looking at a future where we are going to be making ourselves very insecure. And our good friends like China are not our good friends in Myanmar who keep changing their minds from time to time. And maybe some not so good friends in Bangladesh will take every advantage of it. And it will not happen because of their needs. It will happen because I think India will not have dealt with its internal situations as effectively as it might have to secure ourselves first, not to make India insecure. That's where the problem begins. It's another matter how people elsewhere make themselves insecure, but we have to make ourselves secure.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudeep. Nicely brought out. A friend of mine, I couldn't recollect his name. I attended an environmental conference many years back in Dehradun. In that, he specifically mentioned that 10 centimeters, I think it was 8 centimeters rise in the sea level will displace 18 million Bangladeshis. And where do they go? I mean, that's
Exactly.
and the time frame he said was he said anything that was about 4 years back I attended. He said anything from 8 years to 15 years it can happen. I mean, that is very, very near future, not even future, you know. Okay, Sudeep, I have a very, very short question, and I hope it will be a short answer. You have written a chapter called Palace of Straw, within brackets stolen. That is about corruption that you have written. And which is, I really appreciate how you brought up all this, because finally, I think most of the issues related in northeastern India is about governance, as we agreed, and corruption. I mean, it is really, and you brought it out. And but since you interacted with all these people, including many officials and politicians and affected parties, in very brief, will a better is it an issue of better governance, or is it a cultural issue of the people, you know, who are not really cultural issue? Like you also said that, you know, the government money is the money of Delhi. It is not our money. So let the politicians steal the Delhi money. I mean, something worse to that effect you mentioned. So in a very short, we are running out of time. So very short, can you explain this in a very short? Yeah.
So I think the political leadership of many states of the Northeast, there are a few exceptions, and a few exceptions in politicians as well. I think when they adopt this cynical attitude of literally stealing money by saying that it's Delhi's money and it's not our money, they're actually stealing the futures of their own children, because this money is being sent for development. And here, Delhi is also at fault, sir, because for decades, and continues to this day, in order to have its political sort of political advantages in these regions, and also to keep people quiet and to keep people happy, if you will, as their puppets and their totems and symbols, if you will. There very little accountability has been asked for from the leadership of many states of northeastern India. It has been written off to this great black hole of fighting mitigating conflict, right? And when this black hole is created over decades, where money simply just disappeared, tens of thousands of crores of rupees, tens of billions of dollars of development funds in grants and in budgetary aid have been poured into the northeastern states since India's independence. And a lot of the money has just soaked, has just gone. So I think it's not necessarily a culture of corruption based on ethnic matters, but it's a culture of corruption that has been fed with mutual benefit. It's a economy of conflict, sir, that has been perpetuated over decades, as opposed to the economy of peace. So I think to break the cycle of the economy of conflict is the most critical aspect here. When that sense of, we can do what the hell we want with the money that is given to us goes, until that goes, I don't think that sorry, sir, what is very good is that, at least in Nagaland, people are beginning to ask questions of their leaders. Finally, there are new political parties emerging. There are political voices being heard in Manipur. These are wonderful things. In Tripura, there are new political voices. People who are demanding accountability from their entrenched leadership. That is the most wonderful thing. When the people of these regions are asking the hard questions of their leadership, then change can come, sir. Change won't come from Delhi in this particular case. And the fat cats and the vultures won't run away unless they're called to account at the election. It has to be a democratic process. It cannot be any other process.
Thank you. Now, coming to your, back cover of your book, do you recall what you have written here in the back cover?
Yes, Manipur Nathaki Jabo.
Manipur Nathaki Jabo. For our viewers, it says there won't be Manipur in future as we know it if a political understanding is not reached. This is what one of the self-styled journals possibly told you.
Yeah, he did.
This is going to be my last, not question, asking you your thoughts. What do you reflect on this particular, sentence that you have written on the back cover of your book?
So actually, it's in the book, and then it's been placed on the back cover. But point taken, it's been placed on the back cover for precisely the reasons that you pointed it out. It's quite sensational, a statement to have made. And the statement was made to me in Kohima by Ramkating Bara, who was actually the lore in the Naga rebel circles is that he actually assassinated Mr. Shaiza many years ago. So he comes with that, and he was almost made the general of the Naga army, chief of the Naga army, but he lost out for internal politics. So he comes with that seniority. So this gentleman told me this some years ago, but I think with the passion that Ramkating Bara told me this at that particular time, that, I think it was also a moment in time, sir, when there was a frustration building up within the leadership of the Naga rebel army, and NSA and IM in particular. There was a sort of a pushback happening in Manipur. There was a pushback happening from New Delhi. They were feeling cornered at that particular point of time. So I think that statement was made with that context. I do not think that context exists anymore. Manipur Nathaki Jabo, which is a phrase he said in Nagamese, which as you know very well is the link language in Nagaland, and even the Naga rebels speak it very well. So Manipur Nathaki Jabo, I don't think Manipur Thaki Jabo. I mean, there is absolutely Thaki Jaishato. There's absolutely every reason for Manipur to exist, even in the Naga rebel construct. It's moved beyond that because the negotiation, sir, has moved way beyond a time 8 years ago when Ramkating Bara told me that. The negotiations have moved on. Also, very significantly, NSC and IM is significantly weaker 8 years later than it was 8 years ago. It's many in its top leadership are no longer in India. They're away from India. The leadership situation within the Naga rebel structure is quite fragile. And IM has been emphatically demonstrated that they're not the only game in town, that there are 8 other Naga rebel groups that are in play. they're not the sole voice of the Naga people. They never were. They only claim to be. So I think these realities have also come forward. And the frailties and the weaknesses and the ego and the hubris of NSA and IM and other Naga groups have been eminently made visible to the people of Nagaland and definitely the people of Manipur, of every ethnicity in that region. So I don't think, with all respect, I mean, in fact, I loved talking to Ramkateng Bara. It was a wonderful conversation. But with all respect to him, I do not think that Manipur Nathaki Jabo, from the Naga perspective, is is a reality in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudeep. What a pleasure it has been.
Hmm.
I would like to mention that, violence levels are reducing in the entire North,
Yeah.
but this need not necessarily be the indicator that peace is prevail in this region. And I think the two issues that you mentioned are very, very important, and I have taken it. I mean, it is in consonance with my argument so far: the understanding and the governance issues more than anything else. So I hope to see you in the train journey in 2025 to Manipur.
Well, God willing, earlier than that, sir. Manipur is very close to my heart, very, very close to my heart.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to sum up by saying that I think this is Sudeep has done a great job, and also I've learned a lot from this book. We have, I'll request General HK that our interaction is more or less over. If there are any question and answers, General HK, sir, can you help out? Because I can't see in my mobile. Thank you very much for all of you for patient listening. Thank you.
What a great conversation that is on this great issue. There are certain questions and there are certain comments. I will just read all of them, and then you can select one or two on which you wish to reflect, both of you.
Sure.
So, first is from Nishita, and she says, no, before that, Meti Yodha, your colleague is calling you Meti Yodha, who was your neighbor and walking partner, who was also Colonel GS at the IGR North, that is General KJ Singh.
Okay.
So, Nishita says, Sudeep, can you please amplify two things? New Silk Route, how? And second is EP, a bulwark against China. So this is first one.
Mhm.
How could you please explain? Then, so the first question is on the Silk Route from Nishita. Second is more of a comment from my side, observation. When you were talking about apology, last year we saw a memorial was commissioned by Assam Rifles to honor 300 plus soldiers who lost their life. They came up at a big hill in Mokokchung. This sort of annoyed Naga people. Earlier, many memorials of the insurgent fighters were also obliterated, but the memorial of Loingmala stands. Her Kashang has become immortalized. So, what is this memorial business? Any comments? Because it did annoy people. Then there is a reflection by a very senior officer who retired a few years back. He says that NEC must move to Guwahati. CCS must monitor on weekly basis. Tokenism must end.
Yes, yes.
These are profound concerns. Any thoughts? Now, this is coming from a military man who wants, more firmer answers. Then there is an observation from a team of the IPKF veterans who toured all the 7 states just last week only. They did 6,500 kilometers. So Colonel Sidhu says, having recently breezed through 5 of the 7 states in Northeast region, have witnessed firsthand the surface communication infrastructure push underway, not only within the domestic space, but also through to Southeast Asia and through Bangladesh to the sea. This is likely to result in a sea change in economic opportunities. How ready are the Northeast states and its citizens to take advantage of the coming economic revolution? Are there adequate funds available for such economic expansions? So this is observation. Then a comment from Colonel Ved, financial gains to everyone who has to do anything with the politics or administration and governance. This has been the main reason. It's an industry now, and underground organizations are making most of it.
Yep.
Then Nishita again asks, Sudeep, your explanation of Calcutta may implode, that Calcutta may implode implies demographic inundation elsewhere. What measures can we think to guard against this with special reference to Imphal Valley? And then Ved says the influx from across the border has to be contained. Thank you all for a great discussion. Then Manoj Anand says, have the Naga leadership been able to resolve the differences between the tribes of Nagaland and Manipur? What would be the step one before speaking to other stakeholders? So I think you take 2 questions. One, I would say about the new Silk Route or the new development which is taking place. And second, maybe the question which I asked, because Naga people are very sensitive, and that memorial came up. Calcutta implosion, we have spoken about. Let's address these 2 questions, or anything else which you want to address, both of you.
General, I think the several of the comments and questions are interconnected. So, I mean, if I address them briefly, it will be possible to, I think, take all of them on board in various ways and very quickly. So, if I can just sort of, my apologies if I'm sounding very brief because time is short again. I'm happy to interact with all of you.
Time, we have enough time.
Ladies and gentlemen, in future. Now, then let me begin. Let me just go systematically. You know, when you say new Silk Route, it's, I mean, Silk Route, what? China Silk Route, the Belt and Road Initiative. What are we talking about here? You know, so I would be a little wary of the new Silk Route, even if whether it's applied by China or it's applied by India, for instance, to open up its own borders. The fact is that while there's something that we need to keep in mind, that while there is, and I think there's a very senior officer, former general, who mentioned this, that, you know, there is, oh no, the IPKF folks, ex-IPKF folks who travel through, and this is connected to the Silk Route and all of that as well, because this is essentially about connectivity. I don't think that that here we need to isolate 2 things. One is there is increasing connectivity in Northeast India, not just with the mainland, but within Northeast India. That's, we have to understand that the states of Northeast India are connecting with each other better. That's the key requirement of this connectivity. The connectivity with Myanmar first. There is much greater transshipment of goods and services through Bangladesh to Northeastern India, which has been happening for the past several years, over the past decade in particular, and even longer actually. That's been happening, but it's not as much of a volume, in as much of a volume that it could be. I think good things will happen with that, but I believe that is limited to the connectivity between India and Bangladesh, from sort of Eastern India into Northeast India, or when you're discussing roadways connectivity, and most that go branch out from Bangladesh into West Bengal and into Assam. Theoretically, it's possible to go from Dhaka to Guwahati by river, for instance. it is possible to make this journey. So those things are in play. Those things are beginning to happen in various speeds. Railways at a different speed, roadways at a different speed, waterways at a different speed. But the breakaway Silk Route, Indian version Silk Route, which is Asian Highway 1 and 2, which actually traverses through Myanmar to go into Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Singapore, KL, and Kunming and these regions, that is stalled because of the situation in Myanmar. When you're talking about a particular sense of connectivity, looking east, acting east, India's sort of golden necklace initiative, as opposed to China's Belt and Road initiative, so on and so forth, it is incumbent on Myanmar stepping up and offering stability, which it doesn't seem to be offering in the foreseeable future. Very, very limited things. So that break to the east into Southeast Asia for that so-called Indian version of the Silk Route is far from happening. It's far from anywhere close to happening. So I'm not sure if I've addressed that. But the eastern India, the eastern region, is definitely a bulwark against China. In fact, there are so many people from the armed forces, previous and serving. I mean, you gentlemen and ladies know very well that your operative doctrine went years ago, was switched from looking towards Bangladesh necessarily or looking to the rebels of Northeast to actually looking to China. All the deployment that has happened from Kalaikunda to the further east in various sectors in various ways, from army, missile systems, air force, so on and so forth, BSF, everything looks to China as a threat. So yes, I mean, to secure the Northeast would be Eastern India would be a huge bulwark against China. It is a no-brainer. I think that follows. Now, there was a comment about a former general saying that the NEC must move to Guwahati from Shillong. So I will go further. I would say NEC should be recast completely, should be disbanded and put together. All the Northeastern sort of like the councils, and not just NEC. What about DONA? So the Department for the Development of the Northeast region, which comes under the ministry, all these white elephant organizations, to my mind, it is not so much about moving from Shillong to Guwahati. It's just a geographical issue. It is more a structural issue to my mind. These are corrupt and inefficient and inept for the past several decades. These organizations have to go or have to be completely recast for it to make any sense. So I'm completely in agreement with the general there who made the remark, and very perceptive remark. And then there was talk about, can I mention one state here, Tripura, which is done outstandingly well in looking at these sort of silk routes and the networks and connectivity. Tripura is one state in India which actually thinks about foreign policy from using Tripura as a pivot. Tripura is the single largest driving force for the connectivity through Bangladesh, for instance, into northeastern India. That's how it's happening. All the ingresses for the Kaladan multimodal project that are going to be taking place are happening south through Tripura and Mizoram into Sitwe, for instance, on the Bay of Bengal. So Tripura is hugely popular, and I think Tripura is showing the way to many other states of northeastern India in that sense. And this securing the eastern aspect of India, securing Assam, securing Bengal, securing northeastern India, I think to my mind begins with the socio-economic securing of countries like Bangladesh. I think the greatest help that Bangladesh can do for itself and to India is to ensure that its economy doesn't stall, that the amazing prosperity and socio-economic growth that Bangladesh has displayed over the past 10 years continuously, year on year, even through the COVID pandemic, has to be sustained. Bangladesh realized it, because it's not just about India with Bangladesh itself not being able to cope with its own mechanics, demographic mechanics on account of climate change. So Bangladesh is looking at it very, very carefully. They're not just looking at plan A, they're looking at plan B and C now. They're very clear that They have to diversify their economy, they have to diversify their development in order to secure their own country. And I think, to my mind, the greatest aid that India can do to secure itself is to secure Bangladesh socioeconomically. That should be a foreign policy and security imperative, to my mind. Partnership with Bangladesh to secure Bangladesh. And with that, you secure the eastern aspect of India. That is my feeling from reading all policy documents, talking to people on the ground, looking at statistics and looking at all available projections. We can disagree, ladies and gentlemen, but this is something that I've come to really believe in with the evidence at hand at present. And the last point that I will address, General, if you permit, General Himalaya would be probably a better person to talk about whether Naga leadership, or maybe he shouldn't, because that might lead to a diplomatic incident in his negotiating capacity. So let me say this on his General Himalaya's behalf, if you will. I think we need to make it, when you talk about whether the Naga leadership has been able to integrate the Naga tribes into a certain form. Here, I think, friends, we need to differentiate between who we are calling the Naga leadership here. Are we calling the civilian Naga leadership leadership of the civil society, plus the politicians of Naga and people as the Naga leadership? Or are we talking about the Naga rebel leadership as the Naga leadership? Or are we talking ship and they work towards integration? These three things have three very different trajectories. Because the Naga rebel leadership looks at things a little differently, in particular NSA and some of the other rebel groups. I don't think there is an issue within the territory of Nagaland. There are 17 tribes now in the major tribes in Nagaland, 16 plus 1 recently. I don't think that's an issue. The Naga homelands in Nagaland, they are integrated as Naga people. Whether there may be tribal differences and huge tribal differences, but they see themselves as Naga people. I don't think that's an issue over here. The issue might be as to whether going ahead, everybody sees the Naga brothers and sisters who are in Assam, in Arunachal Pradesh, and in Manipur also as part of this cultural whole, as a cultural whole, as an ethnic whole, or as a political whole. If they see themselves as a political whole, then it leads to an issue in Manipur, because then it will get conflated with issues of seceding from Manipur into a larger Naga homeland. These are complicated issues. But so it depends entirely on who's looking at integration of the Naga tribes. Civil society plus civilians and or the Naga rebel leadership, or everybody together. So that is something I think that has been put in play at this point of time. I don't know if I've missed any points, General. If you could guide me, or maybe
you have
I don't know if I've been
a lot
making any sense at all, but I've
all
tried
points
to do
are
my best, sir. If there's any way I can help or expand, or if there's anything that I've missed out.
No, General K. Himalaya, would you like to say anything before I close?
No, sir. Thank you very much. Discussion was on Sudeep's book.
Okay, that's a nice thing. So coming back,
you are the real expert.
Okay.
Sorry.
Coming back to the book.
Sorry.
Because it is such a serious subject. But when you go to the book and read it, it has got so many interesting narrations. I think that is one of the beauties of reading this book. So we could not discuss on those parts. We could have asked you some very interesting things, but topic is so serious. So some other time we'll talk about it. So many issues have been brought up in your book, and some of the key ones, General K.H. could lead the conversation, and you were able to give your viewpoint. And I will not repeat them, but there is a whole collage of the subjects, of the issues. The one small point is how optimistic we are. You know, there may be problems, and there may be a resolving of the problems. Or is the negotiation getting into a tussle to extract more or to prolong or whatever it is? At present, it looks to be sort of in a stalemate. There is a thing called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and that is what you've spoken about, that India, Bangladesh, and within India, Northeast, it is all one, and maybe Burma gets included. A time will come. And I would say that time should come earlier, then we will all enjoy, because it is a lot to do. It is a humanitarian issue also, apart from the issue of the nation and the security and things like that. So between security and society, we have to keep a balance. And there is a theory called Dell theory of interdependence. I think this side of India and the neighboring countries, interdependence can be a great thing. That is my thought. You have mentioned to break the cycle. And I am optimistic. I will take the train to Manipur in 2024-25. And I'm sure things are going to go from good and towards good. And they may open up. You never know how things work. And if we have to go and apologize, we'll apologize to everybody. Who are we? We are everyone. So we all apologize to each other and sit down. But there are political and governmental ways of handling issues. So we will leave it at that. Thank you so much, everybody. All our audiences, thank you, General Himalay, for sparing your time and for reading the book so thoroughly and asking some penetrating questions. And thank you, Sudeep, for writing this book and for taking part in today's conversation.